गिरिवरदारी यशोदनंदन व्रज जन रंजन यशोदनंदन व्रज जन रंजन यमुना तीरा वनचारी यमुना तीरा वनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय गोपीचन वल्लभा गिरिवरदारी जय गोपीचन वल्लभा गिरिवरदारी यशोदानंदन व्रज जन रंजन यशोदानंदन व्रज जन रंजन यमुना तीरा वनचारी यमुना तीरा वनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे हरे जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा शील प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा शील प्रभुपदा जो विष्णुपाद परमहंस प्रवचक अष्टोत्तर सदस्य श्रीमद ईश्वरीय ग्रेसेस भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। इस्कॉन संस्थापक श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। जो विष्णुपाद परमहंस प्रवचक अष्टोत्तर सदस्य श्रीमद भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी महाराज प्रभुपाद की जय। जो विष्णुपाद श्रील किशोरदास बाबू महाराज की जय। जो विष्णुपाद सच्चिदानंद श्री भक्तिविनोद ठाकुर की जय। जो विष्णुपाद वैष्णव सर्ववंशी जगन्नाथ दास बाबू महाराज की जय। जय श्री रूप सनातन भट्ट रघुनाथ श्री जीव गोपाल भट्टदास अविनाश गोस्वामी प्रभु की जय। नमाचार्य श्रीहरिदास ठाकुर की जय। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोपिनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरिगोवर्धन की जय। श्री श्री गौरांगी बेंगलोर ईश्वर भगवान की जय। श्री मायापुर धाम की जय, श्री वृंदावन धाम की जय, गंगा माई की जय, यमुना माई की जय, भक्ति देवी की जय, तुलसी देवी की जय, अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय, श्री हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय, ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय, ISKCON वर्तमान गुरु वृंद की जय, समावेद भक्त वृंद की जय, गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल. All glories to the assembled bodies. All glories to the assembled bodies. All glories to the assembled bodies. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jayamudire Nashtaprayeshu Patreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Sloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtihi. Hare Krishna. Welcome you all to the Friday morning Srimad Bhagavatam class. Today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 26, text number 22. Swachatvam avikaritvam shantatvam iti chetasah vrittibirlakshanam proktam yatapam prakriti para. Swachatvam avikaritvam shantatvam iti chetasah vrittibirlakshanam proktam yatapam prakriti para. Swachatvam avikaritvam shantatvam iti chetasah vrittibirlakshanam proktam yadapam prakriti para. Translation Srila Prabhupada ki jai. After the manifestation of the Mahatattva, these pictures appear simultaneously. As water in its neutral state before coming in contact with earth is clear, sweet and unruffled, so the characteristic traits of pure consciousness are complete serenity, clarity and freedom from distraction. Purport Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The pure status of consciousness or Krishna consciousness exists in the beginning. Just after creation, consciousness is not polluted. The more one becomes materially contaminated, however, the more consciousness becomes obscure. In pure consciousness, one can perceive a slight reflection of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As in clear, unagitated water, free from impurities, one can see everything clearly. So in pure consciousness or Krishna consciousness, one can see things as they are. One can see the reflection of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and one can see his own existence as well. This state of consciousness is very pleasing, transparent, and sober. In the beginning, consciousness is pure. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rup Kada Mahyam Dadati Swa Padantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yudapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raguna Tanvitam Tam Sijivam Sadvaitam Savadotam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostude Taptakanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Jai Shri Krishna Vanchakalpatarubhya Sakvasnubhya Vachat Patitanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Moham Karodi Vachalam Pankam Nange Bijan Kapada Muhammad Shivaram Bhataranam Paramantaman Shri Chaitanya Mishra. Hare Krishna. So here in this verse, we see how Lord Kapila is explained to his mother, Devahuti, that after the manifestation of the Mahatattva, consciousness is pure in the initial state of creation. And the example is given, just as water is in its neutral state before coming in contact with earth, it is clear, sweet, and unruffled. So that is, so pure consciousness is just like pure water. So what happens is when the creation starts, the mode of goodness is mainly prominent more, but as the living entities gradually start getting entangled into the material aspects of life, more into material activities, then the mode of passion and mode of ignorance also start manifesting in bigger and bigger way. And sometimes the mode of passion becomes more dominant, and sometimes the mode of ignorance becomes more dominant. Sometimes goodness becomes dominant. So at that time, the consciousness gets contaminated. So Srila Prabhupada has given example of unagitated water. For example, when it rains, rainwater is supposed to be pure, and if one holds that water, it should be clear. But when that water comes in contact with the mud, then the water becomes muddy. So the consciousness is also very pure in the beginning stage of creation. But after getting involved into the modes of material nature, it becomes contaminated. And actually in the pure state of consciousness, the symptoms are given. Swachatvam means clarity. I mean, one can very clearly see the Lord. Avikaratvam means freedom from all distraction. There is no distraction in seeing that consciousness. And Shantatvam, that is serenity. It's a state of being very peaceful and calm. So when one is fully Krishna conscious, or when one is in pure consciousness, one can realize these three features, that is clarity, freedom from all distraction, and also a state of being very peaceful and very calm. And these examples of these are given, that pure devotees of the Lord. For example, Lord Shiva is supposed to be the best of the Vaishnavanam Shambho. So in the 4th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, we see Lord Shiva is telling, I'm always engaged in offering obeisances to Lord Vasudeva in pure Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is always pure consciousness, in which the Supreme Personality of Godhead, known as Vasudeva, is revealed without any covering. That means when he says that when one is in pure consciousness of Krishna consciousness, which is the pure consciousness, one can see the personality of Godhead without any covering. Now it is covered because as we have got entangled with the modes of material nature, we are not able to see the Supreme Lord. So, but pure devotees can see the Lord face to face, which we'll see some examples also. So Lord Shiva says that because he is absorbed in Krishna consciousness or pure consciousness, he is able to see the Lord without any covering. So that is clear, uncontaminated, and very clear vision, and always peaceful, and freedom from all distraction. So this Krishna consciousness or pure consciousness is a natural symptom for all the living entities, being the part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. The Lord is pure, the jivas are also pure, and the process of connection, that is devotional service, is also pure. So examples are given just like a mother and child. There is a natural attraction for the child to the mother and mother to the child. There is no need of an explanation. So if there is no attraction, then there is something wrong. So this is one example of natural affection that jivas have for Krishna, and Krishna also has for the jiva. And another example Srila Prabhupada gives is also about when there is a natural inclination for the living entities to have sex desire. One does not have to teach, but it is naturally there. So these are all examples by which one can understand that one has a natural attraction for Krishna. Another example given is about magnet. If you keep a small iron objects in front of the magnet automatically sucks these small objects depending on the size of the magnet you have, on the small size of the objects. So Krishna is like that magnet, which he has got this thing to attract all the living entities like us. But somehow or other, because of our conditioning in the 3 modes of material nature, we are not able to understand that consciousness or pure consciousness or Krishna consciousness. So examples are given as to how in the spiritual planets, all the living entities are serving the Lord in pure consciousness. So they are able to see the Lord on a face-to-face basis. And examples are given as to how the cowherd boys and girls, the cows, the calves, the trees, all are in pure consciousness in Vrindavana. This is how they are there in the spiritual world also. And that's why we see that even when we go to Vrindavana, people are always absorbed in Krishna, because for them, there is nothing in life other than Krishna. And they don't even worship Krishna as a supreme personality of Godhead with awe and reverence. There is a natural love between them and Krishna. But what happens is that outside of Vrindavan, generally we see everyone gets materially contaminated. And the more one gets materially contaminated, the more the consciousness become obscured or covered. One example that is there is that about like a bulb. If we have a 50-watt bulb or say a 100-watt bulb, that bulb gives a very clear light. But what happens if there is an obstruction? By means, if you put a small paper in front of it or a small colored cloth in front of it, the light is not clear, it is shaded. And the more layers that you put of this cloth or paper, the more it gets covered. And also, if you put different colors of cloths, dark colored cloths in front of a clear light, the reflection also is reduced. So similarly, our consciousness gets reduced by the more that the living entity gets entangled in the mode of passion and ignorance. Now, the bulb is the same, but what happens is that because of the covering, various layers of covering and the thickness of covering, it exhibits different reflections. Similarly, the more that our conditioning is covered by layers of passion and ignorance, the jiva also, consciousness is covered. And when consciousness is covered, then the jiva can take up other forms of species of life. We'll go into that more later. There is a very nice conversation between Vidura and Maitreya Rishi in the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where Vidura is asking Maitreya, the pure soul is pure consciousness and is never out of consciousness. That means the pure soul is, the soul about us is pure consciousness, and is never out of consciousness, either due to circumstances, time, situations, or dreams or other causes. So whatever may be the situation, the jivas are pure consciousness. Then he is asking, how then does he become engaged in nescience? Nescience means ignorance. So the Lord as the super soul is situated in every living being's heart. Why then do the living entities' activities result in misfortune and misery? So Vidura is asking Maitreya, the consciousness of us is very pure. And the Lord is also seated as the super soul in the heart. But then why the living entities' activities result in misfortune and misery? To which Maitreya Rishi replies, he says that the living entity is in distress regarding his self-identity. That means we are not understanding ourselves to the spirit soul, but rather we have our more understanding or more real attached to our body. We are working more on the bodily platform. Then he says he has no factual background, like a man who dreams that he has his head cut off. For example, if a man dreams that he is being chased by a tiger, suddenly he wakes up from the dream because the dream is a bit alarming. So, but when he wakes up, that dream what he had is not real. So we are all in that state of dream where we are more associated with our material body, but we are not considering the spirit soul that is there within us. So there is another nice example given that as the moon reflected on water appears to the seer to tremble due to being associated with the quality of water, so the self-associated with matter appears to be qualified as matter. So we'll understand this. Moonlight is very, very clear. But what happens when we see a reflection of the moonlight in a pool of water, we might see that the quality of water is not clear. Just we might see that there are maybe waves in the water, but actually the moon is not wavering. The water may be wavering, or the water, there may be water whirlpools or waves in the water, but the moonlight is very clear. Similarly, the consciousness is very, very clear, but what is happening is that we are looking at the reflection, which is this material body, and So similarly, it is said that the self associated with matter appears to be qualified as matter. That means we are because of our association with matter, we are always considering ourselves to be this material body, but not the spirit soul. But the actual fact is that this material body is nothing but a dead matter. And only because the presence of the soul within the body, the body is active. The moment the soul leaves the body becomes dead. So what is more important is the soul which is driving this body. Similarly, if you take a car, a person may drive a car. The car has no value unless and until there's the driver sitting in it and driving the car. So, same way, there is no meaning to this body if one does not understand the importance of the soul, which is the very cause of this material body working. So, in the seventh canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Prahlad Maharaj says to his classmates, he says, "Therefore, my dear friends, O sons of the demons, your duty is to take to Krishna consciousness, which can burn the seed of fruitive activities artificially created by the modes of material nature." And then he says, "Stop the flow of the intelligence in wakefulness, dreaming, and deep sleep." In other words, when one takes to Krishna consciousness, his ignorance is immediately dissipated. So if you understand here, when one takes up the process of Krishna consciousness, all the seeds of the fruitive activities, that means karma, and plus also jnana, whatever it is, mental speculative activity, everything gets burnt up by the process of devotional service. And then the intelligence which flows to wakefulness, dreaming on deep sleep, that stops automatically. Our intelligence is focused on transcendental loving service to the Lord. That, in other words, he concludes that if one takes to the process of Krishna consciousness, whatever ignorance that the jiva has, they are all immediately dissipated. So when one is in the mode of passion or the mode of ignorance, then what happens? The consciousness, there are different stages of consciousness. One comes into any of these levels. So we'll understand the 5 stages of consciousness. The first one is called Avrata Chetana consciousness or Achadita consciousness, or it is also called covered consciousness. For example, plants, trees, creepers, they all have consciousness. It's not that they don't have consciousness, but the consciousness is very, very low, or they are all covered. So this is the first stage of consciousness called Avrata Chetana consciousness. The next higher level is Sankuchita consciousness or shrunken consciousness. That is, here the classification of the species of life is insects to all the way up to animals. So they all have consciousness, but still it is better than the plants and creepers, but lesser than the human beings. The third level of consciousness is Mukulita consciousness or budding consciousness. This is where human beings come. Actually, it's the beginning of the human form of life, where one's consciousness is there. It is budding, but still it is not opened up. And the next fourth stage is blooming stage or Vikasita consciousness. That means this is a stage where one begins his developing some attraction to Krishna, and he has taken shelter of a spiritual master. This is where the bud begins to bloom. If you see a flower in any plant or tree, the flower initially is in the form of a bud, and gradually blooms with the presence of sunlight and other things. But similarly, when one starts taking shelter of getting connected to Krishna and taking shelter of a spiritual master, that bud which is closed, it starts to bloom. So this is the fourth stage called blooming stage or Vikasita consciousness. And the next fifth final stage of consciousness is fully bloomed or Purna Vikasita consciousness. This is the stage where one is fully Krishna consciousness and he is able to see both the self as well as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is the pure consciousness that is mentioned in today's Srimad Bhagavatam. But what happens is that when one becomes conditioned in this material world, then there is a tendency for him to take up bodies from any other species of life also. There are 8,400,000 species of life, and the jivas travel up and down depending upon the consciousness that they develop. For example, a person might be in the human form of life, but if he takes to abominable activities like eating meat or taking to intoxication, they are all in the lower modes. And naturally, the consciousness that he develops throughout his life is based on what he is exhibiting in the current human form. So the same consciousness takes him to the next body, and he has to take a lower species of form of lower form of species of life. He cannot get even in the human form of life. And the conditions of material consciousness is that such that the more a living entity commits sinful activities, the lesser the lifespan of such living entities, and also greater the suffering. That means the more one commits sinful activities, the more suffering one has to go through, and also the span of life gets reduced. And also, the lower the consciousness, the lower the grades of degradation of the living, lower species of life that one has to take. So that is why it is said that this human form of life is like a junction box where one can decide what should be one's destiny for the future. That means one can take a decision in this human form of life, whether I want to be as a human being, or whether I want to get down to lower species of life, or I should go to higher species of life, maybe a demigod also, or I should leave this material world, which is full of distress, and go back to our original home, where the consciousness is always pure. So this cycle goes on in this material world, the process of going up and down. And all that a human form of life, the one does in the human form of life, is to decide what we want to do in our next life. And what we do, our what karma we perform in this life determines what will be our next form of life. So that is why it is said that the mission of the human form of life should be to clarify or clean this consciousness and reach a stage of pure consciousness or Krishna consciousness. That should be the mission of this human life. And it is only in the human form of life that one can understand that whatever happiness that one is trying to aspire cannot be attained in this material world. Because the Lord himself says in this material world is dukkhalayam asasvatam. It is full of distress. But one who thinks that he is trying to attain happiness in this material world, that itself is an illusion, just like a dream which I mentioned earlier. So this place is meant to be a place of suffering. So the Lord says, do not try to be happy here. And if somebody is trying to be happy here, they are mudas or foolish people. And people are working very hard, struggling for existence, but they don't know that they can actually never be happy. So Prahlad Maharaj prays to Nrsimhadev, nice prayer in the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. He says, I'm not at all afraid of material existence, for whatever I stay, or wherever I stay, I'm fully absorbed in thoughts of your glories and activities. That means Prahlad Maharaj is a pure devotee of the Lord. He says, wherever he is absorbed in thoughts of the Lord's glories and activities. But he says, my concern is only for the fools and rascals who are making elaborate plans for material happiness and maintaining their families, societies, and countries. I'm simply concerned with love for them. So Prahlad Maharaj, being a pure devotee of the Lord, is expressing his compassion towards the other living entities like us who are suffering. Why we are suffering? Because we are always making elaborate plans for material happiness in the process of maintaining not only the family, but the society and country, etc. But we don't realize that there can never be any happiness in this material world, irrespective of whatever opulence one might try to get. All that one gets, material opulence, is all finished at some point or the other by nature. if somebody has got a lot of opulence, either it might get stolen, or somebody, all of a sudden, one tsunami might come, which might destroy all the assets or like properties, etc. Or it gets stolen. So many things can happen. Or one might even not live a longer life to enjoy what one has planned to enjoy in the process of the struggle that one goes through. So therefore, Lord says, there is a nice quote in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where the Lord is telling, after many, many births and deaths, one achieves the rare human form of life, which, although temporary, affords one the opportunity to attain the highest perfection. That means we are in the human form of life, and we have gone through many, many births and deaths, through many, many species of life, and every species of life is temporary. But this human form of life is one which gives us an opportunity to attain the highest perfection. Therefore, Lord says that a sober human being should quickly endeavor for the ultimate perfection as long as his body, which is always subject to death, has not fallen down and died. That means this body is going to fall down and die sometime. But yes, a real sober human being is one who should use this opportunity for the ultimate perfection of life. Then he says, after all, sense gratification is available in the most abominable species of life, whereas Krishna consciousness is possible only for a human being. So sense gratification and trying to attain happiness, so-called happiness, which is also an illusion, is available in all the species of life. You take a dog, the dog also thinks that he is trying to enjoy his life, but he does not understand the higher purpose like what human beings can understand. So sense gratification is there in all the forms of life, but the human form of life is one where one can understand what is perfection of life, and the perfection is attaining Krishna consciousness or pure consciousness. So it says that one should not be carried away by so-called temporary happiness. This is not happiness, but rather it is Maya. So the real knowledge is to understand who is the Lord, what is our self, and what is the connection between us and the Lord. That which is what is the process called self-realization. So Srila Prabhupada also mentions in the purpose of these slokas that how big politicians, they make a lot of plans, big rich personalities, they make a lot of plans, but even a skyscraper can also fall down. So many instances where all these things fall down over a period of time due to time. Time itself destroys all these assets. And at any point, one person, a living entity, can be kicked out of this material world, some fraction of time. So Srila Prabhupada says that it is material world is very, very difficult. And not only is it difficult, the material modes of material nature is very, very difficult to overcome. So there is sloka in Bhagavad Gita 7:14, Devi Esha Gunamai Mamamaya Durat. So this material world consisting of three modes of material nature, it is very difficult to overcome, except for one who surrenders up to the Supreme Lord. Whereas the pure devotees, that means who are practicing pure consciousness or Krishna consciousness, they can see the reality that whatever is there, it's all temporary, and they are more bewildering. So on account of the contaminated consciousness, people are trying to be happy in this way. But devotees know that this is an endeavor which is actually bewildering. So whatever is there, it is bewildering for us. It's an illusion. It's simply a waste of time. So real business is just to see how we purify our consciousness and come to the original Krishna consciousness. So the qualities of original Krishna consciousness or symptoms of pure Krishna consciousness are given. One is that Swachatvam, where it is mentioned that clarity. It's very clear. Like I mentioned about clear water, the consciousness is also very, very clear. Then the next one is Avikaritvam, that is freedom from all distraction. There is nothing that can distract a pure consciousness because he's always absorbed in Krishna consciousness. No amount of illusory energy can distract such a person. And the third symptom that is given is Shantatvam, that is peaceful and calm. So one who is actually really practicing Krishna consciousness, or one who is situated in pure consciousness, is always very, very peaceful and calm, which is what we are all aspiring for. We all want happiness. We want to be peaceful, but that peace cannot be obtained as long as one is entangled in the three modes of material nature. So Prahlad Maharaj says, in fact, into his father, he says, "O best of the Asuras, king of the demons, as far as I have learned from my spiritual master, anyone who has accepted a temporary body and temporary household life is certainly embraced by anxiety because of having fallen in a dark well where there is no water but only suffering." So this material world is like a dark well where there is no water and there is only suffering. So this is what Prahlad Maharaj says, that the material world is like that. Therefore, he says one should give up this position and go to the forest. That means earlier people used to go to the forest for practicing self-realization. That's not required now. One can be situated in the same place. As Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, wherever he is, one can be situated in practicing devotional service. Then he says more clearly, one should go to Vrindavana, where only Krishna consciousness is prevalent, and should thus take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Like I mentioned, we don't have to necessarily go to Vrindavana. We may go once in a way to pilgrimage and come back, recharge our batteries, but our focus should be only to develop Krishna consciousness by taking shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Another nice quote in the 4th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where Prithu Maharaj, who is an empowered incarnation of the Lord himself, is giving an instruction. He says, by the inclination to serve the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, suffering humanity can immediately cleanse the dirt which has accumulated in their minds during innumerable births. That means we have accumulated a lot of dirt through the so many births that we have gone through, which is all where it is not in our spirit soul, but in our minds. It has accumulated in their minds, in our minds, in the process of taking birth in so many lifetimes. Then he says, like the Ganges water, which emanates from the toes of the lotus feet of the Lord, such a process immediately cleanses the mind, and thus spiritual or Krishna consciousness gradually increases. So we have accumulated a lot of dirt in the process of taking birth in so many species of life, in so many births, and that can be cleaned by the process of Krishna consciousness, by which everything goes off. Just like when one takes bath in Ganges water, it is that Ganges water is very holy. In spite of so much of garbage that people might be putting in the Ganges water, but still Ganges water has got that purity. So similarly, Krishna consciousness is such that it can bring one can become free from all the anarthas that one has got. Now we are all, if you look at the soul that is there within our body, is also Satchidananda. It is full of eternity, bliss, and knowledge. But the reason that we are not able to realize is that we are taking shelter of Asat. Asat means that which is temporary. So this material nature is such that it is temporary, it is not permanent. There is some time or someday which will come to an end. So therefore, it is said in the Shastra that one should not remain in the Asat platform or temporary platform, whereas one should come to the platform of eternity, bliss, and knowledge. Then Srila Prabhupada also mentioned that this Shanti or peace cannot be attained as long as one is attached to the asset. The more we are attached to the temporary factors of life, like body, opulence, etc., then one can never attain peace of mind. If you ask the most richest person, is he happy? He will say he is never having peacefulness. The reason is that initially one has go through a lot of hankering. How can I accumulate this? How can I accumulate that? One who is driving a small Maruti car will think, how can I buy a big car? So this way, all through his life, one goes on with hankering, the process of hankering. And finally, when one has to give up all these before leaving this body, one goes through a process of lamentation. That is why if you see these people, even when they leave their body, they go through a lot of suffering because money doesn't come very easily. One has to struggle a lot. One may have to even cheat, tell lies. Whereas in this Srimad Bhagavatam, there is a quote as to Mother Earth does not or cannot bear the burden of even a single lie that is spoken. Now, if you see how many lies human beings may speak on a day-to-day basis, and particularly one who accumulates wealth does not get it simply by being speaking the truth. He has to speak so many lies. Of course, Srila Prabhupada also says that sometimes if you speak the truth for a businessman, he may not be able to make money. But what has happened is that speaking lies has become a common way of life these days. So that is why the more one lies, the more one cheats, he starts indulging in sinful activities to accumulate opulence. And the more sinful one becomes, the more that one's consciousness becomes contaminated. So pure consciousness is one, or Krishna consciousness is something where there is a clear understanding. There is no change, and it is always peaceful. So Lord Rishabdev gives a lot of very nice instructions in his teachings, the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So there are a lot of nice instructions given by Prahlad Maharaj, Rishabdev, etc. And in one of these instructions, in Rishabdev's teachings, he says that those who are interested in reviving Krishna consciousness and increasing their love for Godhead do not like to do anything that is not related to Krishna. So that means to become Krishna consciousness, we should not indulge in activities that are not related to Krishna. Everything that we do has to be related to Krishna only. And he says further, they are not interested in mingling with people who are busy maintaining their bodies, who are busy in eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. That means those who are taking up the process of Krishna consciousness, they don't associate with those who are busy in maintaining their body in the process of eating, mating, sleeping, and defending. Why? Because if we associate with them, we develop that quality, that nature in us. Then he says, they are not attached to their homes, although they may be householders. I mean, they may be grihasthas, but they are not attached, which is what Krishna tells in Bhagavad Gita also. One should not have attachment to anything or anyone. Then he says that nor are they attached to wives, children, friends, or wealth. But at the same time, they are not indifferent to the execution of their duties. So here Rishabdev says that one does not become indifferent to execution of his duty. One performs his duty, whether a father, a mother, everyone performs their duty, but they don't have development, they don't develop attachment to anyone or anything. Such people are interested in connecting. I mean, those who are attached to the household listing, they are interested in collecting only in, those who are actually taking the process of self-realization, they are interested in connecting only enough money to keep the body and soul together. So a devotee also knows that this body is temporary, but still to sustain his body, he has to work, he has to perform his duties. So a devotee does not do over endeavor. He does not overeat, he does not oversleep. A person in the mode of ignorance sleeps for 10 to 12 hours. He can't live without sleeping 10 to 12 hours, and he's always dreaming. And that is a real mode of ignorance. A person in the mode of passion is not satisfied with whatever he has got. He wants to endeavor more and more and more. And in the process, he is not able to take up the process of self-realization. And rather, he degrades himself into other forms of life to the extent that he commits sinful activities. Another fine, beautiful instruction that Srila Prabhupada gives in one of the purports is that about taking up the process of Krishna consciousness also, many times people take up the religion to get material benefits, but that is wrong. So Srila Prabhupada says that many go to the temple and praise to the Lord, give me this money, give me that, give me this, give me that. That is not pure devotion. That is devotion, but it is mixed. Now, what is the difference between pure devotion and mixed devotion? Mixed devotion is like a pious life. That means if we seek material benediction by practicing devotional service, it will end up in getting pious results, by which the next birth one can get opulence, one can get wealth, one can be born in a rich aristocratic family, one will get a lot of intelligence, but it is not pure. So therefore, that is not a devotional activity. Devotional activity is different from pious activity. So by pious activities, one can get material, so-called happiness, janma ishwarya, and so forth. But one also by which one can get birth in a nice family, rich family, Brahmana family, etc. And one can get immense wealth, born with silver spoon, etc. Education, nice education, material education, etc. So this is, we might see in many aristocratic families, they have performed some devotion service apart from other fruitive activities. That's why they have got birth in such families. But Sri Prabhupada mentioned that one should utilize the results of such pious activities to become more pure. That is called swacha, which is mentioned in this purport today. Swacha means pure. So that how, because when one takes up the process of devotional service, the Lord might give one a lot of opulence, but in the process of getting the opulence, one should not become attached to it, but rather one should practice the consciousness in such a way that he understands that this is a temporary, and reach a stage of practicing devotion service without any expectation from the Lord. But the moment one has got expectation from the Lord, that automatically becomes pious activity and not pure devotional service. So Sri Prabhupada says that on account of pious activities, one can get surroundings, beauty, education, etc. But that is all by tamoguna or rajoguna, passion and ignorance. So naturally, these are all polluted consciousness. So Dhruva Maharaj, actually, if you see an example, very clear example, Dhruva Maharaj left home to get opulence much more than what his father had. He wanted a kingdom more than even Lord Brahma. So he went to perform tapasya in the forest. But he got the shelter of a spiritual master in the form of Narad Muni. And thereafter, he performed tapasya to such an extent that the whole universe came to a standstill. And the Lord actually appeared right in front of him. But when he saw the Lord, and the Lord asked him what benediction he wants, he said, I was looking, he rather said that I was looking for a piece of glass, but now I've got a gem. That means seeing the Lord or getting Lord by the performance of devotional service is much, much more important than material opulence, which is like a broken piece of glass. But finally, if you see Dhruva Maharaj's example, he ended up getting a lot of opulence, but he realized, and finally he lived as a pure devotee, ruled as a pure devotee, and then finally he went back to the spiritual world. So this is an example as to how one should not seek material benediction, by which one's pure consciousness is covered or obscured. So only when one is engaged in service of the Lord, one will pure devotional service, one can reach a stage of pure devotional service where one can reach these three symptoms, that is serenity, clarity, and freedom from all distraction. And when one reaches a stage of this pure consciousness in this material world, one can identify such personalities also. Just like we might see a rich person traveling in an opulent car. From that, we can identify, oh, he must be a rich person. So similarly, pure devotees who reach the stage of practicing pure devotional service, they can be identified even in this material world because they are in the stage where they have reached pure consciousness, and which is called the Brahma Bhuta platform. Or like the Lord says, Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma na shochati na kankshati. They have reached that platform, they are always blissful. They have no hankering and they have no lamentation. So finally, before concluding the class, there's one more nice quote which I would like to give from the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where Prahlad Maharaj says what he learned in the womb of his mother. He says, when the devotee takes up Krishna consciousness, he is then freed from all material contamination because he constantly thinks of Lord's pastimes and because his mind and body have been converted to spiritual qualities. So one who is taking up the process of devotion service becomes automatically free from all material contamination because his mind is always absorbed in the pastimes of the Lord. And because of his intense devotional service, his ignorance, or rather the material consciousness, and all kinds of material desires are completely burnt to ashes. That means we might also realize in our own life, as we have entered the taking up the Krishna consciousness, we might have lost many things that are material or temporary. But the only thing is one should not be attached to this, which will take us further to the material modes of passion and ignorance. And one who is very sincere, the Lord is also seated within our heart as Paramatma. He sees that all these material desires are completely burnt to ashes. Then Prahlad Maharaj says, this is the stage at which one can achieve the shelter of the Lord's lotus feet. So when one takes and reaches a stage of pure consciousness, that is a stage he gets shelter of the Lord's lotus feet, and that he is fully protected because the Lord takes care of his devotees. Lord himself says, Ananyas Chintayo Mam. The Lord knows what is a living entity, what a jiva requires, and he provides. But one has to be serious in the practice of Krishna consciousness, by which one can reach the stage of pure consciousness. This is all I have for the class today. So if you have any questions, any comments, you can ask me for the next couple of minutes.
Hare Krishna, Tirtha Chaitanya Prabhu. Please accept my humble obeisances, Prabhuji. Thank you for a wonderful explanation of pure devotional service.
Accept my apologies also, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu.
You said pure devotional service is the most important part of it.
Yes.
But right at the initial stage, it doesn't come.
Yes.
It's a gradual process.
Yes.
Which actually goes up and culminates into pure bhakti.
Yes.
How does one realize at what stage he or she is in, and whether he or she needs to go further up or more practice or more seriousness?
Yes. Now, as I mentioned here, when one reaches that pure consciousness, he does not have an attachment to anything material in this, anyone or anything. That is the stage, a clear symptom that one has developed when he has reached the stage of pure consciousness. And he is always blissful in the Krishna consciousness. But when we practice Krishna consciousness, we have not reached that stage. But Prabhupada has mentioned that one can reach this stage also by association with pure devotees of the Lord and always being engaged in Krishna conscious activities. So the more we engage in Krishna conscious activities, the more easier and better it becomes. It's not very easy, like it is said, but then one should be determined. Like Prahlad Maharaj was very determined. Dhruva Maharaj was very determined. So the more one becomes determined, Srila Prabhupada said one can even go back to the spiritual world in this lifetime itself. But even a small tinge of expectation that we have, which generally is not very easy to give up, but we have to keep that as a goal of life, because if that desire is there, Lord will definitely fulfill that desire also. Because after all, He is giving shelter. So the Lord is taking care of the devotees. So we should not have a desire for anything material and not have any sort of an attachment. It is said that even an attachment to become free from this material world is also a bonding, which binds us here. So we should be free and leave it to the Lord that, okay, I am taken shelter of the Lord, Lord knows, and He will take care of me. That should be our motto. So even if we have to come back to this material world, because the Lord desires or our spiritual master desires, we should not say that is unfavorable to the Lord. That will lead us to the pure Krishna consciousness. Did I answer your question, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu. Very aptly you said that, the tinge, even a smallest tinge that one has, will
Yes.
retain him in the material world.
Yes. Yes, Prabhu.
Though it is something very, very difficult, but it's something that's not impossible.
Not impossible, we have to aspire for it.
We have to aspire for it, and with the 4 things, Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra's guidance,
Yes.
plus having a complete faith in the holy name of the Lord,
Yes.
I think one can attain, and our association of pure devotees.
Yes.
I think these are things that one needs to really practice to
Yes.
go to that stage and then attain pure bhakti of the Supreme Personality of God and Krishna.
Yes, Prabhu.
Thank you very much, Prabhu.
Thank you
Very
much.
nice explanation. Really appreciate that.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you, Prabhu. Anybody
Hare
else?
Krishna, Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare
But
Krishna.
but it is very, very difficult, right? With the family around, taking care, concern to the family,
Yes.
getting so deep. Yes, we are into Krishna consciousness, but
Yes.
as you said, to attain total devotion, it is slightly difficult, right?
Even in the material world, to obtain anything is not very easy, Mataji. It is difficult. One example that we were there the last week also was disappearance day of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura, who gave a perfect example of maintaining a family and also practicing spiritual life. So we all have to learn from the examples of these great acharyas, how they have lived, and try to imbibe those qualities in us. Of course, like I mentioned, one should not give up the duty of taking care of the family, but one should not at the same time develop an attachment and forego the spiritual aspects of life. That is the way one can.
Okay, Prabhuji. That's what we are doing.
Yes.
But anyway, Krishna's blessings and mercy should be there. That
Yes.
is the.
It is always there. Like it is said that it is up to us to take it. Mercy is always there from the Father. Who is that parent who is not interested in the welfare of the children? So it is up to the one who is the recipient of that mercy. So we have to endeavor for that. When our endeavor is sincere and determined, definitely the Lord will give His mercy also, irrespective of wherever one is situated, whatever situation one may be.
Okay. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you.
Dhanyavad.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any other question? So can I take the class as over, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu. I think you've done justice to all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prabhu. Granth Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila
Jai.
Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai. Jai God.